questions in the chat box, and either myself or one of the reps will answer any questions that you have. Again, mics and cameras, please keep those switched off because we will be recording this session. And we are recording it now. So welcome everyone to our senior college event. And I'm going to let the reps introduce themselves and just tell a little bit about their college and yeah, and share that information. So I'll let you decide who wants to go first. And again, if you are a student or parent, please keep your mic and camera switched off. Questions in the chat box, we'll respond. All right.
I really quickly wanted to jump in. Hi, everyone. I'm Mrs. Wright. For those of you who don't know me, I'm the college and career counselor at Towson High School. I just put a link in the chat box for a feedback form that just has 6 really short questions for after this event is over. So just please, if you have a minute, fill that out for us.
Thank you, Ms. Wright. So who wants to go first? Erin, do you want to start off and share just a little bit about where the college you're from, and then we can move through all the panel.
Sure. Hi, everyone. My name is Erin Davis. I'm one of the assistant directors at the University of Delaware. The University of Delaware is located in the town of Newark in the northwest part of Delaware. We are a land, sea, and space grant research institution. We have about 18,000 undergraduate students. Our average class size is 35, and our student to faculty ratio is 12:1. We are the Fighting Blue Hens with NCAA Division I athletics. We also have club sports and intramurals. We have over 400 student organizations. 30% of our students are involved in Greek life, and 1/3 of our students study abroad. We'll have more questions later on where I could tell you a little bit more about our application process.
Thank you so much. Jordan, Mr. Cartwright?
Yes. Hey, everyone. Nice to meet all of you. My name is Jordan Cartwright. I am the Associate Director of Admission at St. Mary's College of Maryland. I've heard some incredible things by a previous colleague who is no longer with St. Mary's, but did recruit at Towson High School. I work for St. Mary's College of Maryland, which is probably 2 hours south of Towson. We have some notable alums who have graduated from St. Mary's and gone back to the Baltimore area and done some incredible things, including the current mayor of Baltimore City right now, who I actually had the opportunity to meet. We are a public institution that is smaller. We have 1,500 students, and we are the first public honors college in the country. So it's some really unique history as a public school that is small, that is a honors college. So really excited to meet all of you and talk about some of the questions that you might have around the admission process. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Miss Harris, would you like to go next?
Yes, I would love to. Good afternoon. My name is Janelle Harris. I am the admissions counselor at the Great Coppin State University in Baltimore, Maryland. I am also a proud alumna of Coppin State University. Coppin State is an HBCU, like I said, located in Baltimore, Maryland. We have approximately 2,500 students who are enrolled, with 600 students that live on campus. We are the most affordable 4-year institution in the state of Maryland, with a plethora of majors for you to choose from, some new graduate programs as well. And some of them will be 4+1 programs where students can get their bachelor's degree and go straight into the graduate program. We look forward to enrolling some Towson alum, Towson High School alum, I should say, to visit our campus to enroll for the fall 2022 academic year. We do have no application fees this upcoming year, and we are test optional. And I'll go into that a little bit more when our admissions process questions come up.
Thank you so much. Ms. Basali?
Hi, sure. My name is Christy Basali. I am the representative for the University of Maryland, Baltimore County, or UMBC as we are well known. We are located in Baltimore County, so we are an enclosed campus. On either side of us, we have 2 small college towns, Catonsville on one side, Arbutus on the other. We're about 15 minutes from Baltimore City and about 35 minutes from Washington, D.C. So we're a nice hub for our students to be able to explore in those surrounding areas. Our typical undergraduate size here at UMBC, we are a mid-sized public institution, so you're around 11,060 students, and then that plays a really big role in terms of the average class size here at UMBC. So our average class size here is around 25 students. As mentioned, we are part of the American East Division, so we are also a Division I school. So if you're looking to play at the recruited level, that's something to also share. But we have tons of majors and minors for our students to choose from, so we have plenty of interests that you can find your passions and find your best fit here at UMBC. And I'd love to talk a little bit more about our admissions process afterwards.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So what I'm going to do to start with is just ask a question. Feel free to jump in if you want to respond. If you don't want to respond, that's fine. And then we'll move on to the next question. And students and parents, if you do have a question, don't forget that this is being recorded. So please post your questions in the chat box, and either myself or one of the admissions representatives will respond to you. So our first question is, how many schools would you recommend that a student apply to? So I'll open that up. If anyone wants to jump in and share their thoughts.
So I'll just come off of mute if that is okay. So it's not a one-size-fits-all approach to everyone, but what my suggestion is to have schools that you are really strongly interested in, separated it into 3 different categories. You have your schools that are your dream schools that have every single component of what you would want in a school. Then you have schools that you believe you have a good chance of getting into, that are reasonable, that are great options for you financially and also academic. And then you have your schools that you're likely to be admitted into, which is the 3rd category. I suggest having at least 1 school for each of these groups and kind of working from that. But it really depends on how much you're able to manage with the classes that you're taking senior year and being able to put together an effective application for each one of those schools. So quality over quantity is one thing that I always stress for.
Thank you, Mr. Cartwright. Would anyone else like to share an opinion?
I would.
Yes.
I would just like to tell students that they need to they need to narrow their selections down quite a bit by the beginning of the new year. So if you have 10 schools that you're interested in this fall, by January, I would say you need to definitely narrow that down to 5, maybe by February, the end of February, 3, so that you can get your top choice before the decision day comes up for that school, so that you can kind of get an idea of financial aid packages. Once you narrow those 3 colleges down, then you can kind of communicate with them about financial aid packages and programs, so that you can kind of get a feel for what would be the best choice for you. I think a lot of students have very ambitious goals. Sometimes it's just a matter of trying to say you received acceptance letters from so many different schools to impress your family or friends, but that may not be the wisest decision to make when trying to figure out what's best for you. You really want to make sure they have the major that you're interested in or the program. Think about internships, think about affordability, think about accountability. Do these programs actually follow up with their students and follow them through the process to get them towards graduation? Internship opportunities that program may have offered their students. You want to take all of those things into consideration to help you narrow down that choice so that you can get to your decision day choice by the deadline.
Those deadlines are really important, and we'll talk about those in a bit. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Harris. Would anyone else like to share, or we'll move on to the next question? Okay, let's move on to the next question. And Ms. Harris, you kind of mentioned this a little bit in your response, but how do I know that a school, if a college is a good fit for me? There are thousands of colleges. How do I know that particular college that I'm looking at, maybe online, how do I know that would work for me? What are some things that I should look for?
I would say, one, if the school is offering campus tours, try to get onto a campus tour schedule. I know that during COVID, there are a lot of schools who have some restrictions, but some schools seem to be open to family tours more than group tours. So this is the perfect opportunity for you to get that one-on-one time with the student ambassador or the counselor. You can also make appointments with your counselors. I'm sure that everyone on here has staff members that will meet with their students virtually, and they may have a little bit more flexibility than we did before COVID. So some counselors, like myself, I'll have some off office hours to talk with students about the environment, the programs, and then you can also ask if you would like to schedule an appointment with the staff, other staff or faculty members in your department, and students. So I have been able to pair students with other interested students, staff members with interested students for particular programs, just so that student can get that one-on-one feel of, is this the right place for me? If you can't get your questions answered, you can't get the appointments, that might not be a place that you want to go, because if you get there and you can't get the questions answered that you need, might not be a good fit for you if that's something that you're looking for. Some students are very independent and they can handle it on their own, but some students need some extra guidance and assistance. And so if that's the kind of school you're looking for, if you're calling that school and you're not getting that assistance, it might not be the best fit for you.
Thank you. Would anyone else like to jump in with how students should choose, how students know that a college is a good choice for them to apply to?
Hi, I think that Ms. Harris had some great suggestions, and I truly recommend trying to visit the campuses if you can. Being on campus and envisioning yourself there as a student is going to be the best thing that's going to give you an idea if that's a place that you want to spend 4 years. And if you are unable to visit campuses, there are so many other options now than we had just 2 years ago. There are virtual campus tours that have been expanded. There's virtual information sessions. Right now, we are virtually all meeting, but we're not together. And that's something that we really didn't do 2 years ago. So if you're unable to visit campuses, please explore those options, because they are available to you, and to meet with your admissions counselors, as well as faculty. Students are all available virtually as well at most schools.
Thank you so much. Would anyone else like to jump in, or we'll move to the next question? Okay, we'll move to the next question. And this is around deadlines. Now, you decide on the college that you're going to apply to, and then you have to pick a deadline. And some colleges have multiple deadlines to choose from. So that can be complicated to pick the right deadline. So maybe you have some thoughts about that. But my other question is kind of leading on from that too. So you talk about deadlines a little bit, but also, is there a benefit to submitting my application early, before the deadline? So if the deadline is November 1st, for example, will I get extra points if I submit it by October, some date in October? So could you talk around that? Mr. Cartwright, do you want to share any thoughts on deadlines?
Yeah, not a problem. So it's going to vary from school to school. I do know at St. Mary's College, we don't start looking at applications until all of them have been processed, which typically happens on that date of the deadline, which is November 1st for us, right? So it can be a little bit different from school to school, depending on which schools you're looking at. But there's no specific advantage to having your things submitted before the deadline for your purposes of being admitted. Now, personally, if you do have your requirements submitted beforehand, then you can kind of be more comfortable knowing that your application is completed, which is really important. So I do encourage students to complete things as early as they possibly can. But meeting that deadline, making sure everything is submitted at that November 1 deadline, I think is pretty important for students. So I don't know if anyone else has anything to add to that.
Thank you. Ms. Basali?
Sure. Yeah. So here at UMBC, specifically, we have two deadlines. So we have an early action deadline, which is November 1st. And it's really important to understand the difference between early action and early decision. So if you are admitted for early action here at UMBC, it's non-binding, and you will have the opportunity to, again, get connected to those resources. So if you have questions about financial aid, if you have questions about your major, your program, we are able to help and assist you get connected to those early on. Again, as Jordan mentioned, it's really important for us to be able to review you by those deadlines. And so submitting your information not only gives you that sense of ease and you're calm, you know that you've had everything submitted by the deadline, but should there be some issue and you've noticed that, it's a great way for us to troubleshoot beforehand so that way you do meet those application deadlines. Again, here at UMBC, early action is pretty important because if you are looking for automatic merit scholarship consideration, that November 1st deadline is really important to meet. Outside of that, if you are looking to maybe apply for additional scholarship opportunities, so take advantage of our scholars programs, which are an additional way for you to get additional scholarships, those applications have separate deadlines that typically happen in January. So if you want to take care of one application, give yourself a break, and then move on to those other applications for those scholars programs, you have that. And then if you want to apply for our regular decision deadline, which is February 1st, and you don't want to necessarily do early action, that is, again, another option for you to consider as you're going through and narrowing down your list of colleges as well.
Thank you so much. Would anyone else like to comment about deadlines? If not, we'll move on. We have plenty of questions coming up. So another question is, how many students do you accept from your first deadline? Do you weight one deadline more heavily than the other? Is there an advantage to students applying by an early deadline versus a regular deadline? So could you talk about that? Ms. Davis, would you like to share?
Yeah, sure. I'll jump in here. So specifically at the University of Delaware, we do not have a set standard amount of students that we admit, based upon our early action deadline, which as the same as the other schools, our early action deadline is November 1st. So you're going to hear that a lot, that date. Usually, as long as a student is admissible and they apply by our early action deadline, those are the standards that we're looking at. It's not going to be a set amount of students. And as was mentioned, the ability to apply early action is showing the college that you are super interested in them as an institution and as a school that you want to go to. And it's also a relief to have that application in and that application submitted. And if you're trying to get an application in for that early action deadline, a lot of schools, if you don't get all those materials in, they'll be able to just roll you right over to the regular decision deadline. And if your application is ready by November 15th, you're going to be one of those first students to get that application reviewed. So getting your materials in earlier and your application submitted is just going to help you throughout the whole entire process, be able to get your financial aid faster, set up scholarships, do all of that research so that you're not rushing come spring.
Yeah, you don't want to rush. You don't want to feel rushed, right? So getting things done early, submitting, and checking, and then that gives you time to check to make sure everything's in on time. If there's an issue, like I think Ms. Basali was saying, you can contact admissions and get it resolved before the deadline. Thank you. Do transcripts and letters of recommendation from teachers and counselors need to be received by your deadline or submitted by your deadline? So do you need everything by the deadline, or is it okay if some things arrive after the deadline?
Can I jump in on this one?
Yes. Yes.
So I would definitely say that you should try to get any requirement that the institution is asking for. You should try to get it in by the deadline. However, make sure that you know who is writing your recommendation letter and what the expectation is and the standard is for that institution. So I've had students write recommendation letters, but they weren't gleaming recommendation letters. So you would definitely want to make sure that the person who's writing the letter for you is speaking truthfully. Of course, we don't want them to lie about it, but you want them to give the best representation of who you are. The best relationship that you can find is the best recommendation letter that you can turn in. Don't just get a recommendation letter just to fulfill the requirement, but actually make sure that it speaks to who you are as a person so that we get to know who you are through paper, because pretty much we're looking at who you are on paper unless we request a special interview with you. So you want to make sure that that representation is in that recommendation letter in addition to your academic profile. And if they can explain anything that may be on your transcript that we can't see, I've had students who had issues at home, and so on their transcript, they may have gotten a D in a class or an F in a class or didn't do too well in a particular semester, but their counselor or their teacher was able to speak to how well that student was able to rebound from that situation and get back on track. That helps us to see what kind of student you are academically, because truth be told, that's what college is. It's not just the next grade. It's not 13th grade, but it's a step up, a level up in your education. And so we want to make sure that you're able to handle the academic rigor of college level work.
Thank you. I think that's a really important point about choosing or asking teachers who really know you well and can speak to your strengths. Asking those teachers to write a letter of recommendation for you. The counselors, we write a letter of recommendation for all our students. So, but choosing the right teachers that know you well. And that kind of goes to my next question. If you have a teacher, maybe last year your teachers didn't know you very well because you were virtual or you just didn't have that connection with your teachers from last year. Is it okay to go back to, say, 10th grade? Maybe there's a teacher in 10th grade that knows you really well and can speak to you as a student. Is that okay to ask an older teacher, Ms. Basali?
Sure, yeah, it is 100% okay for you to ask a teacher that you've had maybe your freshman year, your sophomore year. It is a really challenging and interesting time for students at the moment, so we completely understand. And again, we really want to see who you are as a student, and that letter of recommendation really should come from somebody who can speak to who you are as a student. They can speak to your accomplishments. They can speak to how you've overcome any struggles in their classrooms. And it's a great way for us to get to know you. So you would rather have someone who knows you very well write a really wonderful letter of recommendation, and that's okay if it's from your sophomore year or from your freshman year as well.
Thank you. Yes, unusual times. My next question is, if each school asks for different numbers of letters of recommendation, usually it's 2, maybe 1, maybe none, maybe more. So let's say you're asking for 1 or 2. Is it better to ask more teachers? So let's say, like I said, let's say you ask for 2 and I send 4 to you. Is that good, or do you not want more items, more letters of recommendation than what you ask for? Should I send lots more, or just stick to what it is that you're asking for from each applicant? Go ahead.
I would say stick to whatever the school is requesting, but try to get the strongest out of the 4. We do have to read these recommendation letters, and we don't want to be bombarded by 15 letters coming in for one student. If you're that good of a student, it will show in the 2 or 3 that are requested, and there's no need to increase that number of recommendations. And it won't necessarily help you get in any more. It doesn't bear any more weight. So just stick to what this institution is asking for. I think that would be most beneficial for the student.
Okay. Does anyone else have? Jordan, you're agreeing?
Yeah, I am agreeing. I think it's important to follow rules, especially when it comes to those guidelines for what to submit as official documents for your application. So If a school requests 2, submitting 2 would be what you would want to do more than likely. But these are absolutely wonderful points that Ms. Harris pointed out. So I couldn't agree more with that.
Thank you. We do have a question in the chat box from a student about scholarships. So maybe each of you could talk about how your particular college handles scholarships. I know sometimes just applying, I'm automatically put in a pool for scholarships. Sometimes I have to apply separately. Do I apply first for the school and then think about scholarships? Or how do I do that? Or do I do it all at the same time? So if you could talk about scholarships for your particular college, that would be great. So Erin, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I'll start. So with the University of Delaware, you would submit your application. If admitted to the university, you will be automatically reviewed for a merit scholarship. And this merit scholarship is based upon your academic performance. And you will be given that scholarship amount when you do receive your admissions decision. From there, if you decide that you're going to go to the University of Delaware, you would commit to that scholarship and to your financial, if you apply for financial aid and you have a financial aid package, if you apply through the FAFSA, you would accept that package when you commit to the university. I will say some schools do have deadlines, so if you do have to commit by May 1, that is kind of important to note that if you do not commit by May 1, if you commit afterwards, will that scholarship still be there? So that's just something that I do want to point out for maybe some other schools. But yes, you would automatically receive that scholarship and would not need to do any additional application afterwards.
Thank you. Jordan?
Sure. So when it comes to St. Mary's, the scholarship that we automatically evaluate every single student for is our merit scholarships. And that is based purely on your weighted GPA from high school classes. In terms of SAT scores and do you want to submit those, I would say that if you believe your SAT scores enhance your application, it could possibly boost you for a higher merit scholarship award eligibility. So that's something to have a conversation with me or an admission counselor about. In terms of scholarships that are not offered through the admission process, but throughout the college as a whole, there are other opportunities that are available to students. We evaluate students based on scholarship if they have or demonstrate a different type of need. So those are questions to ask about what type of need-based scholarships are available, because those are available at St. Mary's College as well. So there's a couple of different avenues to get money, but typically you are focusing on your admission process. And then after you get your decision, if you're admitted, then you can focus on the scholarship process.
Thank you. Ms. Basali?
Sure. So here at UMBC, we typically ask students to apply by the November 1st deadline for automatic merit scholarship consideration. After that, for a regular decision deadline, it's typically based on available funds. So if you can submit that application earlier, the better. And then if you're looking for additional scholarship opportunities, we do have quite a few opportunities here, and they are based off of academic areas of interest. So as I mentioned before, our scholars programs here at UMBC, we have 7 of them, and they are based off of academic areas of interest. So if you are maybe an arts and humanities major, you're maybe looking to go into visual performing arts, there's a particular scholars program that would allow you to be a part of a cohort, as well as get that opportunity for a scholarship. The most important thing that I really tell students to do is submit your application to UMBC for automatic merit scholarship consideration, and then take advantage of our tool that will allow you to review those scholars programs, as well as any of our institutional, as well as any of our departmental scholarships that we offer. It's called the Scholarship Retriever. And the easiest way for students to get access to that is, one, to apply. When you apply to UMBC, you get a confirmation email from us, and that allows you to set up a My UMBC account, track your application status, but it has the most important thing, which is your campus ID. This campus ID you would use in the scholarship retriever, and this is something that you can use before you're admitted to UMBC to apply to those scholarship opportunities. So when you do receive your decision, later on, towards the beginning of January, February, when our decisions for scholarship starts rolling out, you would have already submitted your application for those deadlines, as well as you'll receive the amount, an award of what you'll be receiving, and you can make your informed decision as to whether or not you would like to attend UMBC.
Thank you. Ms. Harris?
So at Coppin State, you are automatically considered for scholarships. They are on a first admitted, first considered basis, and they range from partial to full for the merit-based or academic-based scholarships. And then we do have need-based, and then, of course, athletic scholarships. And so students are, of course, considered for athletic scholarships depending upon their recruitment from the athletic teams. Need-based is based off of your FAFSA, which is very important to complete. The date is October the 1st, so get that on your calendars now. But I do want to say that there are other funds that students do not apply for outside of the universities. The universities cannot sustain free scholarships or full scholarships for every student that they have on campus. And though there's a lot of money to give away, sometimes it's not enough to cover your full bill. So you definitely need to go out and find other sources of funding to fund your educational endeavors. This could be your job. If you're working at McDonald's right now, I went to McDonald's and they have a sign that they will pay up to $3,000 of tuition for their students, for their employees, if they are students. Your parents, their jobs or their employers may have scholarships for their dependents. Any fraternal orders or police academies or social organizations in your surrounding community may offer scholarships for their students. So there are scholarships and money that doesn't get spent every year because students just don't apply. And so you definitely want to make sure that you're doing some research on scholarships. You can never apply for too many. And I always tell students to apply for a range of scholarships, whether it's $500 or $250. That may cover a book that you may need. If it's $500, it may cover a meal plan. So definitely make sure to apply for all ranges of financial funding in terms of the dollar amount, and all different types from different organizations that you can find. You can never apply for too many. So start that process now as well. Maybe make Sundays or Saturdays scholarship Sundays or scholarship Saturdays, and apply for 10 every Sunday so that you can try to get your funding pool up now.
You can never apply to too many. And I also appreciate your point about sometimes scholarships, nobody applies for them, or just a few students apply for them. So I think sometimes students think, I'm not going to apply because thousands of people are going to apply and it's pointless, but you never know. And so just keep applying to scholarships. And it can pay off. And I tell students, look, the scholarship's $1,000 and it's asking for one essay. A couple of hours of work for $1,000 is a pretty good deal. So apply when in doubt. I see the question in the chat box. I'll get to that in just a second. But my next question is around testing. So the question is, are you test optional? And if you are you really test optional? Or, because I think sometimes students think that if you're test optional, you really want them to submit their test scores. But if you don't accept test scores or you don't require them, what else are you looking at to kind of balance out the application? So the question is, are you test optional? And if you are, what else is playing into that, into the application? So we'll get your feedback. We'll start with Erin again, and then we'll go through the panel. So Erin, can you talk about that?
The University of Delaware is test optional. We have been approved to be test optional for fall 2022 and fall 2023. So for us, yes, if you want to apply test optional, go ahead. It does not affect your application at all. We either look at an application with test scores or we look at an application without test scores. And it's not a thought. You're not getting a penalty because you're not submitting them. It's truly something for you as a student. Not everybody is a great test taker. I was not a great test taker. I even look back at how many times I took the SAT and wish it wasn't such a thing, because I probably now, so many years later, would have not even considered retaking it over and over again, trying to get a better score, because that just wasn't what I was meant to do. It wasn't meant to do well in the SAT. And that's okay, because we look at other factors. We do, at the University of Delaware, we highly look at your GPA, your academic performance, your grades. If you are considering test optional or not, it's recommended to go test optional if your SAT scores are below our average. So the lowest of our mean average SAT score is an 1180. So if you're below that, we recommend going test optional. If you're above that, it's completely up to you to submit your test scores or not. If you do submit your test scores, you can send them from the College Board or from the ACT site, but we also do accept self-reported test scores. So as I was saying, it's completely up to you. And if a school is test optional or test optional, you make that choice. If you want to have a conversation with me about which way you should go, my virtual door is open. My door is open. Please, reach out and we can have that conversation about what's best for you, because it's not one size fits all.
Thank you. All right, Jordan.
Yes, I had a hard time unmuting myself. In terms of test optional applicants, we actually saw a decrease in how many students actually submitted official test scores. So in previous years, 100% of students would submit test scores. In the pandemic, that adjusted to 31%. So there was a sizable decrease. In terms of what scores students had, it was pretty consistent with previous years. A combined score of a 1270 and roughly a 24 to 25 equivalent with the SAT or the ACT. So with all of that being said, if your test scores come in above what the average is or right at the average, there's no harm in submitting that. If you have scores that are below that, my advice is to not submit test scores and to apply as a test optional applicant, right? And it will not hurt you, but if we do have these test scores, they will be taken into consideration. So before you send them to us, make sure you fall above those averages. But we are test optional as a school. You can apply without test scores and still be evaluated for scholarships and other opportunities.
Thank you. Ms. Basali?
Sure. At UMBC, we are also test optional for this fall. And so the most important thing that I would say is, for us here at UMBC, we are a common application school. Please take the time to review the question that's asking you if you would like to be test optional or not. I had quite a number of students who wanted to be test optional and applied for early action, and then we're just a bit confused as to why they weren't reviewed, and it was because we were waiting for those test scores. It happens, and if you do need for us to adjust or make a change to your application for test optional, you can always reach out. But again, I would like to kind of, mirror what my colleagues say. Our approach to reviewing applications is holistic and, more importantly, additive. So we're reviewing what we know about you, and that's coming from your common application. That's coming from your letters of recommendation. It's coming from what you share with us in terms of extracurriculars within your common application. Your essay plays a really big role in terms of, understanding who you are, understanding your passions and your academic interests, and kind of seeing how that would work with our UMBC campus and community. In terms of averages here at UMBC, we had scores from our students from percentile test score ranges for SATs range from 1190 to 1360. If you fall below an 1190, again, I would recommend maybe going test optional. But if you have questions or concerns about the scores that you have and you want to talk about that before, submitting them, you can always reach out and set up a virtual appointment with me as well. In terms of scores, sorry, one more thing. We do request that official scores be sent to us. So you would need to request the official scores from the College Board for your ACT or SAT scores if you do choose to send them in to us.
Thank you. And I just want to also mention that the school counseling office does not send test scores. We do not send test scores. So either if the college allows it, you self-report, or like Ms. Basali was just saying, you have to submit official test scores. You have to do that from the College Board and or the ACT. Ms. Harris.
So Coppin State currently is test optional, but I do want to make students aware that there are two different terms that you may hear. One is test optional and the other is test exempt. And so you want to know the difference between the two. So test optional means you have the option to submit or not submit. Test exempt, that school does not require them. They won't accept them. They don't need them at all to make a determination on your application. And so for Coppin State, it is test optional. We want students to be able to decide whether or not they want to submit those scores. But like every other school that has mentioned, we do want you to be able to submit the best scores that you can. So if your scores don't meet the requirement, I would not suggest submitting them. I actually had a student with a high GPA, low test scores, and they were trying to submit them. And if I was to have received them, then I would have had to consider that in their admissions decision. So don't submit test scores if they are not in the range for the school. And also consider whether the school, not consider, but inquire whether the school does super scoring, which means that they will take the two highest test scores that you have taken between all of the tests that you have taken and add those two scores together to get you the highest possible score. Also, consideration for scholarship may be contingent upon your test scores. So if it helps to build your academic profile for consideration for scholarships, then definitely submit them if they are high enough. But in terms of our admissions consideration or determinations, we do look at the academic profile and the rigor of the student's profile. So if a student is taking AP, IB, or honors courses, we take that into consideration. Any leadership that they may have in school as well. So if they're on the SGA, if they're a student athlete, if they're in a club or organization, that can weigh into our consideration as well. So definitely take that into consideration when applying and ask those questions when you are communicating with your admissions counselors.
Thank you. And you mentioned SuperScore, and Christy, you also put about SuperScore in the chat box. Can you explain what that is? What is superscoring?
Sure, yeah. So if you, for SuperScore, specifically for us here at UMBC, we SuperScore for the SAT. And that means is that if you've taken the SAT more than once and you've done better on a certain section on one test than the other, we'll take the highest score from each test for each section to give you that combined highest average overall SAT. So let's say you got a 500 on one section on the SAT and you got a 550 on the other one, the second time that you took it. We'll take that 550 and then use the other score that you've had, which is the highest one, and then give you that highest combined average for your SuperScore for the SAT.
Thank you. A student asked in the chat box, and I know we talked about test optional and changes with testing. Are there any other different actions in the admissions process to accommodate this continuing unprecedented situation? Is there anything else that is different this year that maybe we haven't talked about? For example, I know that some students can't join all the clubs they wanted to do or participate in the sports that they wanted to have participated in. Is that impacting other areas of the application process that you would? And I'll let anyone jump in to address that. Oh, yes, Mr. Cartwright.
Yeah, so these are things, and I'm pretty sure everyone would agree with this, is it's really important for us to know. And there's a supplemental portion of the Common Application essay that allows you to document some of these experiences that you've had. We have seen students who have opted to work increased hours since the pandemic started, which is something that we would want to know in the admission process. When you're submitting your application, filling it out with as much information as you can give us is going to really help us advocate for you as a student. So we want to know about these experiences. If you've had a sharp decrease in your extracurricular activities and you're not playing sports anymore, or that instrument that you used to play, we want to kind of know about those adjustments as well. If you are able to talk about your passions, the things that you've learned, that's always kind of a good substitute for that, because we want to know what you've been doing with your time, but there is no negative thing from sharing with us that you've been working, or you've learned a new hobby, or you've taken on something else to kind of grow, even though so much has stopped.
Thank you. If anyone else would like to jump in, please do so. Otherwise, we'll move on.
I would say that I've taken the opportunity to get to know students. This has been a time where I would normally be on the road, and it gave me an opportunity to connect with students. In the chat, I put my contact information, and I do have an Instagram page. So I was actually able to talk to students on Instagram as well. But they could also book an appointment with me and talk to me. And it helped me to get to know them better, to see the student better. And to get them to realize that we're people too. We understand that things happen in life. And as a matter of fact, I was a student last year at the same time as these students were students going through the pandemic. So I understood their plights. So it's really good to see if you can get an interview or talk to the admissions counselor if they have a booking link on their university's page, to actually try to schedule that time so that you can actually meet with them and they get to know who you are. That's really important, I think.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have about 10 minutes left, and I wanted to ask some questions around the essay. I think for a lot of students, the essay is one of the most challenging pieces of the application, and takes a lot of time. And for example, here's a question. I don't know what prompt to choose for my essay. Where do I start? So if you're using the Common App, there's multiple prompts. Maybe if you're not, there's multiple prompts for your application. How do I pick one? Who wants to jump in and answer that one?
Jordan looks like he has a good nugget.
Yeah, go on, do it.
Yeah, so I always tell students to think. You have to be really reflective and think about what you are, your characteristics as a person. So I always tell students to ask themselves, if I was going to talk to some of your friends at school right now, what are the 3 characteristics that they would use to describe you? And then I would try to think about those characteristics and how they resonate with the prompts that you have. And I know that sounds really complex when I say it out loud, but we're trying to assess who you are as an individual and how well you'll fit with the type of institution we are and the type of culture that exists at that school that you're looking at. So how are you going to best display that through your admission essay, I think is really important. So if your friend says that you are energetic and empathetic, which prompt is going to showcase that the most? So think about those options and think about how you can show who you are in a very authentic way. And that would be my advice for how to choose which prompt you should use. And Christy.
Oh, I also had some issues with unmuting there. Thanks, Jordan. I would also say just exactly what Jordan said, but if you open up the application, you don't necessarily have to complete your application in one sitting. So that gives you the time to review those prompts. Maybe take a photo of them, take a screenshot of them, write them down, and then just put them to the side and then come back to it. Start brainstorming ideas. If you're able to jot down points for each, that's awesome. If you're not able to jot down a point for one topic, maybe it's not the topic that you select. There's other options too for students to select, specifically for us here at UMBC. There is an option for you to kind of write about what you're passionate about. So if you're reading through that list of topics and selections for those essay topics, and nothing speaks to you, and you're like, I can't talk to any of these. However, I'm really passionate about this. Maybe you work on the side and you want to talk about a work experience that helped build you to the person that you are today. You can do that. If you're passionate about a particular subject or interest, and you wrote this really awesome essay and you want to tell us about that during one of your classes and how you work through that problem, you can do that. You don't necessarily have to be bogged down by those specific questions, and if you can't answer them, we don't want you coming up with a story saying just to meet those specific requirements. We want you to talk about who you are and your true authentic self and your true authentic voice, and that means sharing the stories that works best for you. And it doesn't necessarily have to answer that specific prompt that we've outlined for you. You can select the one that says, I want to tell you about something else. Here's something else that I want to share with you that might not be highlighted in the common application, but I think it's really relevant for my application itself.
Thank you so much. Very good. And don't rush it, and it has to be authentic to you, and see which one you respond to as you're looking at the questions. I think I heard you say. All right, thank you. Okay, so then the other question I have around the essay is, are there things I shouldn't write about in the essay? Is there something I should leave out or not discuss?
I think for me, the biggest thing is that if I'm reading through your essay, I want to know that you took the time to write your essay. So just make sure to go through, do a quick spell check, a quick grammar check. That doesn't hurt. This is also not a text, so I don't want to see like LOL, like ha ha ha, like all through that. It's great, but it's not meant for the college essay. So just take the time to just go through and just make sure that you're submitting the correct essay, because I know some colleges have different application portals, so you might not be a common application school. They might have their own application. And so if you're applying to UMBC, I would love to see the line that says, oh, I'm excited to be a UMBC Retriever, not the name of another school. Again, it happens. Don't worry about it. But again, we would love to just see that you are truly interested in the institution that you are applying to.
You're right. No text speech, right? Or smiley faces. The English teachers at school will also help you review your essay. You should never send your essay in without somebody else checking it for you and just reviewing it. And your English teacher in English 12 should help you with that. Okay. No smiley faces, right? Okay. We're kind of coming to the end. We have a few more minutes left. Are there any last words of advice or suggestions that you have for students navigating the application process? Is there any parting words of wisdom you'd like to share with our students? And anyone can jump in.
I would just say consider your public institutions, your private institutions, your in-state institutions, and out-of-state institutions. I think a lot of times students just want to get away from home and not realizing there are benefits in staying home. There are Maryland dollars that you may receive that you can't take out of state with you. And you can still get that away from home experience in the state without having to leave the state. So consider all of your options before you just say, I'm going to the University of Miami, and then you get a bill that you may not be able to afford because you didn't think about it. And even in that, consider, and I know a lot of students do this, especially if they want to go out of state, they don't consider how close that is to home and what that means in terms of travel and that travel expense that goes along with the tuition expense, and lodging and all of that. So definitely consider that if you're planning on considering schools further away. What are the plane ticket prices like? Can you afford to come home for holidays? Because I've had a student, she had to choose whether she was going home for the winter holiday or was she going to go home for Thanksgiving, because her parents wasn't going to be able to pay for both so close together. So just take all of those things into consideration when considering schools, and sometimes think outside the box. There may be a school that is best for you that you wouldn't have considered before. And so look into all of the institutions in your area close to you, who may have your major, who may be affordable. Just take all of those things into consideration.
Thank you. That's great advice. Sometimes students think they want to go to California, but then don't think about the plane fare and how much that is going to impact them. And also just the time, traveling time too. You can't just go home and if you need to in a day, you know. Anyone else like to share any last words of wisdom?
Yeah, I'll jump in here. I think it's important to just recognize that myself and my 3 other colleagues here, we're here for you. So don't hesitate to ask questions. If you don't know what you're reading on the application, you don't know which to select yes or no for the test optional, to be test optional, reach out to your admissions counselor. You're going to find that information on the website. Check an email you've received from the school. That contact information is there, and we're here to help you. We want to make sure that you submit the right question and you get your application in and your answers your questions are answered. So don't hesitate to ask those questions and to reach out.
I'll also follow up here. Erin did bring up a really good point. Please check your emails. That is one of the best ways that we get connected with you. So if you are missing something, I will send you emails being like, hey, I think you need to submit this. So I know a lot of my colleagues will do that as well. And we want to see you meet those deadlines and have you join our institution. And the best way to do that is to complete the application and the necessary requirements. So if we're missing something, we're sending you emails and updates, and it's really important that you be proactive and check that. Maybe check it once a day, maybe check it once every other day, but it's really important for you to kind of stay on top of that as well.
Check your email. Yes, because you're going to get a lot of emails and you don't want to miss anything, especially if you're getting an email from a college admissions counselor saying you're missing an item that you need to submit. So keep an eye on your email. Anything else?
I would say to make sure you establish relationships with students at these schools that you choose as your top schools, and try to talk to them and kind of figure out why they chose that school and get a really good feel of what their experience is there. That could be something that resonates with you and can help you with your decision as well.
Thank you. Thank you. And students, I put this in the chat box, but please make sure you copy the contact information that was posted in the chat box in case you do have questions. You can reach out to all of us to help and support you. The counselors at Towson will be coming into the English 12 classroom soon to help you. Make sure you're checking Schoology constantly. Miss Wright puts a lot of information in Schoology in the class of 2022 counseling group. So make sure you're checking that, I'd say at least a couple of times a week to make sure you're keeping up to date with that information. Please reach out to your school counselor also for support as we move through the admissions process. I'd like to thank everyone for coming today. I'd like to thank Erin, Jordan, Christy, and Janelle for their time and sharing their amazing advice with us. We really appreciate you and your support of Towson High School. I'd like to thank our students and parents for coming. And yeah, reach out to us if you have any questions. Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great day. Bye-bye.